Hello, 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 and welcome back to another edition of Fan Talk, your favorite podcast by your favorite fan. That is right, Kyle Brinchley in the house on this Wednesday, back to our normal day, hump day. Here we are. How are you guys doing today? I'm doing pretty good, considering the circumstances. But life's a roller coaster. Sometimes you're going up, sometimes you're going down, sometimes you're doing the loop-de-loop, and sometimes you're getting off the ride being like, dang, I want to ride that again. Or maybe not so much because I lost my lunch. But regardless, guys, welcome to Fan Talk. This is a podcast by me, Kyle Brinchley. Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. A little cloudy outside for your weather forecast. I think it should snow. Hopefully it snows. It's still February. I know a lot of people are wanting the warm weather, but frankly, February is a cold weather month. So we'll keep it up with that. Rogue One's here. The candle's burning. Ladies and gentlemen, I failed to acknowledge and celebrate myself. Last week's episode of Fan Talk was my 100th. Get this, 100th Fan Talk episode. 100. I have made 100 of these. Can you believe that? That is absolutely crazy. 100th episode. Wow, I'm just blown away that it's been this long, that I've done it this long. I want to share my screen here. I started this podcast, for those of you who maybe are new and don't know, I started this podcast November 4th, 2022. I was at university at the time and I wanted to do a podcast. This was actually the second podcast I produced. The true fans out there know that I have another podcast called Non-Professional Dating Advice, which is an absolute great time. Go check it out. Go watch 21-year-old Kyle spread his plethora of knowledge surrounding dating. Since I'm such an expert, I made a podcast about it. Go check that out. That was the first podcast I did, and that had its time, and that came and went. And I was kind of like, you know what? I need to do something a little more sustainable. Maybe something I'm a little more passionate about, something a little more long term. So I settled on, something that is just so important to me. That's such a big part of my life. And that is, of course, sports from the perspective of a fan. I've been a fan since day one, since I came out of the womb. And now look at us, 2.5 years, not quite 2.5 years. Let's see, 2 years and 4 months. So coming up on 2.5 years. For some reason, I thought it was 3. That's probably because my other podcast was kind of running during that time. But regardless, 100 episodes later, and I am still here to another 100 episodes here on Fan Talk. Wow, I just appreciate the support. Mostly this, and I'll be frank with you, this is not a podcast where I'm trying to make any sort of splash in the world, whether monetary or influence-wise. This is not a big podcast. This is a very small production. I do this, I don't have a legit studio. I don't have legit equipment. I don't have a large following, frankly. If anything else, this is a hobby, and this is a passion of mine, and this is something that I really want to keep up, something I really want to keep moving forward. And I think part of it is because it is hard to be consistent at anything in life. It is hard to dedicate yourself to something and to do it week after week for 100 episodes and counting. Do hard things is something that I've learned recently. Well, I've learned it throughout my life, but recently, hard things will come your way. You can either tackle them head on and learn how to deal with them, or you can bow down and be defeated by them. So I choose I choose the former, the first one. I don't know about you guys, but it's been super fun. I'm super excited to keep this podcast going. Thank you guys. There's my little intro, 4 minutes and 30 seconds into the game. Let's jump into this episode. I'm really excited for this episode. It is going to be super fun. This one is for you, dummies. So if you know nothing about sports, if you're listening to this podcast, if you tune into me week after week and you're like, man, I don't know a thing he's saying. I am so lost. I'm just here because I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here. Then this is for you, ladies and gentlemen. It is now February. Football is over. We've closed the book on that. Baseball's not quite here. It is college basketball season. March is only 8 days away. Thank you, February, for being such a short month, which means that March Madness which is college basketball. A big tournament, I'm sure you've heard of it, is coming. So we're going to be talking about a term today known as bracketology. Now, this is my third year talking about bracketology. Bracketology is the study of how the college March Madness bracket is made. So, for those of you who do not know, 68 teams, college teams, university teams make this March Madness postseason bracket. So, the colleges, every college who has a basketball team in Division 1, which is like the best division, there's multiple divisions, but Division 1's like the best division. Probably the school you went to is a Division 1. University of Utah, Division 1. BYU, Division 1. Utah State, Division 1. Even Southern Utah, Division 1. Utah Valley, Division 1, and so forth. If you're from out of state, your flagship university is probably Division 1. So these Division 1 teams play all season long, and if they played well, if they won a lot of games, if they won a lot of games against teams that are in their conference or group, they're grouped in different groups, then they qualify for March Madness postseason, and that is what bracketology breaks down. Because similar to college football, there are a lot of teams, but there are limited spots. College basketball, obviously, there's 68 spots. For college football, there's only 12 spots. So it's hard deciding who gets in, and you have to have criteria, and you have to have a resume per se, proving to the committee. There's a committee of people who choose who gets in and what seed they get, and I'll talk about seeding in just a second. You have to prove to them, just like a job interview, you have to prove to them why you are a worthy candidate to be in this position, to have this job, to be in the NCAA tournament. So today I'm going to break down bracketology, what it is, what teams are projected to be in the tournament right now, because the regular season is still going. The tournament is not yet set. Selection Sunday will happen in March when they will reveal which teams made it. So that's coming up in almost 2 weeks now. It's pretty crazy how fast February is going. But let's talk bracketology. So bracketology, simply put, obviously is not a made-up term because it's very real, but it's a relatively new term that has come on the scene. I joked in the past that you can go get a bachelor's degree in bracketology. Joe Lunardi is the guy for ESPN who kind of heads this project of men's bracketology throughout the season. I think he starts like right at the beginning of the season. So in November, he kind of starts piecing together his projections. And it's kind of fun to follow along and see how your team's doing, to see if your team is currently projected to make the tournament, what they need to do, and so forth. So this is a feature you can go find on ESPN. I've used this for years and years and years. I love it. Joe Lunardi, as you can see here, he updates it every 2 to 3 days. Once it gets close to the end of the season, he'll update it daily. But as you can see, last time it was updated was Tuesday morning at 8:30 a.m. So any games yesterday have not been taken into account. That's just kind of how it goes. So I'll kind of explain kind of what you're seeing here on the screen, and then I'll go more into depth into what bracketology is, the seeding, what you're looking at, and I will make you no longer a dummy. I'll make you an expert so you can impress your friends with your knowledge of bracketology. So here we go. The bracket watch. So kind of how he organizes his little structure here is the top overall seed essentially is number one team. They're the best team. They are number one. That is Auburn right now. And then he's got this category called the first team out. Now, there's, like I said, a bunch of teams who are trying to prove themselves, trying to be like, hey, I deserve to be in there. But unfortunately, not every team can make it. So he likes to highlight the teams that are kind of on what he calls the bubble. And the bubble encompasses the teams that are the last 4 teams that are barely getting in and the first 4 teams that are out, that won't make it. So right now, VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, is going to be the first team out, projected just barely to miss the tournament, while Wake Forest is projected to be the last team in, just making it. So there's kind of this fine line, the bubble right here, that a lot of teams are kind of tight roping right now. So as you can see, he breaks it down on the bubble. He's got a couple of categories here. Last 4 buys. Essentially, in recent years, they moved the tournament from 64 teams to 68 teams. They just kind of added a few more almost play-in games. just to add more teams to the tournament and to make it a little more interesting. So a bye, last four bye, technically means that you don't have to play an extra game. Whereas, as you can see here, these teams have to play an extra game just to get in, but it allows an opportunity for more teams, if that makes sense. A little complicated. You don't have to know everything right now. I will slow it down for sure. Thanks for staying with me. So as you can see here on the bubble, last four buys, notable team for my Utah people from the 801, BYU has snuck into the last four buys throughout the entire season. I've been tracking this. They have not been on this list very much. Kind of having an off year. They lost a lot of their players and their head coach in the transfer portal. Of course, Mark Pope went to Kentucky and took some players with him, Jackson Robinson and so forth. So Kevin Young, really establishing a new team in many ways here in Provo. But they've played very well recently, just absolutely obliterating Kansas last night at the Marriott Center. So BYU is projected to be in the bracket, and they don't have to play to get in. Last four in, these teams, they do have to play an extra game to get in. So as you can see, and many of you guys know, and if you don't know, I'm a big Oklahoma fan. Oklahoma is currently on a 5-game losing streak. They're not playing very well right now. They're in a very good SEC basketball conference, and it's showing. They were 13-0 in non-conference play, which means they won every single game outside of their group. But once they got into their group, they've only won 3 out of, I think they've won 3 and lost 9 or something like that. So it's not looking good for them. They're currently projected to kind of be in this play and get in sort of thing. But as you can see, they're currently trending down. A couple more losses, and they might find themselves on the outside of the bubble. First four out, these are the teams on the other side of the bubble who are just barely going to miss it. These are teams that need to win a couple more games. They need to prove themselves just a little more. They need to say to the interviewer, hey, this is what I bring to the table. This is why I'm better than the other candidates. This is why you should pick me. And then these teams as well, they have a lot more to do. These teams really have to hustle over here on the next four out, because not only do they have to jump these first four out, they have to also probably jump some of these last four in as well. So uphill battle, but not impossible for those teams there. Okay, let's look at the bracket as a whole. As you can see here on your screen, and I'm sorry if audio listeners, if you're not able to see this, just imagine if you've ever seen a bracket before. Essentially, it has teams paired against each other, and it's separated into 4 categories. And essentially, you win, you move forward. And the teams get whittled down until there's only 4, and then 2, and then 1, so forth. So there's this is what the bracket looks like, and they kind of have 4 divisions. So they have the South, the Midwest, the West, and the East. And in each 4 division, it's broken up from seeds 1 to 16. So there's 16 teams in each division, and there's 4 divisions. So for example, the South, as you can see here, there's Auburn, who's number 1, and it's numbered all the way 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 16, which would be either Omaha or Southeast Missouri State. But you can also see in the Midwest, there's also a number 1. So there's 4 number 1 seeds, 4 number 2 seeds, 4 number 3 seeds, and so forth. So that's kind of how it's broken up. It gives teams opportunities to have home court advantage. Not necessarily home court advantage. Sorry, that's not what I meant to say. It gives teams an opportunity to be the higher seed and to potentially have some upsets there. But the seeding, the lower the number, so 1 is the better team, 16 not as good. So some notable things so far that I see right here. If you look at the South Division in Atlanta, that's where we'll play. Atlanta, Georgia is where kind of one of the final games will play. But Lexington, Seattle, Milwaukee, a couple of these sites are going to be all over the U.S. So notable, I see Utah State, which is currently projected as a 9 seed. That would be a very tough position because Gonzaga, don't ever count out Mark Few. Sure, it's not the team of the past where they were really good and played in the national championship game, but don't ever count out Mark Few. That is a very tough first 8-9 matchup. If they do get past Gonzaga, they have to play against Auburn, which personally I think have a very, very good shot of winning it all this year. So Utah State would hope to win out probably the rest of the regular season, get a couple more quality wins, prove themselves a little more, and try to get a different seed because that's very tough right now. As you can see here in the Seattle side, to 12. You see that there's 2 teams there, and you're probably like, hey, what's going on there? Remember, there's a couple teams that have to play an extra game just to get in. They are the last 4 in, if you remember. So as you can see, Arkansas and Wake Forest are currently on that last 4 in. And so they would have to win that first game. Arkansas and Wake Forest would play, and who would ever win would get to play Maryland in Seattle, if that makes sense. But yeah, going through some of these other ones, as you can see, usually these higher seeds, like 15 Bryant, you're probably like, I've never heard of the school Bryant. These 15 seeds, 14 seeds, 16 seeds, and even 13 seeds are usually teams that they're in smaller conferences that aren't maybe as good or as competitive as bigger conferences, but they win their conference tournament and they get an automatic bid into the postseason. So there's some teams that automatically get in. And the way they do that is, remember how I said they play in groups and conferences? The group and the conference has a little mini tournament before this big tournament. I know, so many tournaments to keep track of. Bear with me. So they play this mini tournament with their conference, and they play against only teams in their conference. And if they win that, if they come out as the sole winner, as the champion of the conference, they get an automatic bid into the postseason, into this March Madness bracket. So that could shake things up as well if a team that's not that good somehow wins their conference. They're not projected to get in, but they do win, and they somehow get in. They potentially take a spot of one of these bubble teams. See, this is where it gets very interesting. And bear with me. Basketball and sports in general, it's very much control your own destiny kind of deal. And that's how it is in life too. Control what you can control. There are some things you can't control. Sports-wise, you can't control how other teams perform. You can't control if other teams win or lose. You can only control if your team wins and lose. Similar in life. You can't control others' actions. You can't control what people think or say about you. You can only control how you react, what you think, what you do. So in this particular situation, these teams in the first 4 out, they can only win out. They can only control what they can control. They can't be like, oh, I hope these other teams lose. I mean, they can, but that's out of their control. So what they need to do is win. They need to take care of business and secure their spot, because there could be Cinderella teams that come in and surprise everyone and steal a bid into the tournament. All right, guys, you guys are being so patient. I love it. I love it. Just know that you won't be dummies after this. You guys will be experts. People will like you. Ladies, if there's any ladies listening, if you explain this to a guy that you know bracketology, oh my gosh, he will bend over backwards. He will give you the world. Take my word for it. And guys, if the girl's not interested in hearing this, then maybe she's not the one. Okay, moving on. Let's see what other notable things that I'm seeing here. Oh yeah, here's BYU, currently projected as a 10 seed. They would play in Wichita against a Memphis team. I think that's a very winnable game. BYU, and then they would get a game against Texas A&M, which would be very interesting, kind of fun there. Let's look on this side of the bracket. Alabama, Alabama, kings of football, but also blue bloods in basketball now. Pretty cool there. Yale, always smart, always getting in from the Ivy League. A couple other teams here. Duke with Cooper Flagg, kind of a team that people are thinking are a favorite to at least make the national championship, Final Four national champion, if not win it all. Kansas is slipping a little. As you can see, Oklahoma is going to have to maybe play in and then go against UCLA, which would be a tough game. Utah Valley, there you go. If they win their conference tournament, then they get an automatic bid. That's what that AQ means, automatic qualifier. They play an Arizona team. That's a tough matchup. Anyways, you guys can play around with this and take a look yourselves. These will change. Again, this is not what is actually happening. This is just the projections. What will actually happen will be determined on Selection Sunday after those little mini tournaments within your conference and after the regular season ends. Then this committee will sit down. They'll review each team's application, each team's resume, each team's experience, determine, did they win enough games? Did they win enough good games? Did they play well? Did they prove themselves to be in this tournament? Because essentially you want to put the best teams in. You want to put the teams that have earned it, and you want to put together an awesome March Madness bracket. One more thing I'll show you here, the conference breakdown. Currently, this just shows how many teams from each conference are currently getting in. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but I'll reiterate it and kind of refresh it. In college basketball, every school has what they call a conference, which is like your group that they put you in. You play those teams. At the beginning of the season, you play teams outside of your conference, but then towards the end of the season, you play teams inside your conference, and then those are the teams you play in your little mini postseason tournament before the March Madness tournament. So as you can see right now, as it stands, Joe Lunardi has 13 teams from the SEC in, 10 teams from the Big Ten, 8 from the Big 12, 4 Big East, 4 ACC, 3 Mountain West, 2 WCC. So, I mean, some of these bigger conferences like Big 10, Big 12, and SEC kind of have the best teams. Big East sometimes has some really good teams, same with the ACC. And then these smaller conferences like the WCC, the Mountain West, some of these other conferences only get 2, maybe 3, sometimes only 1 team in. So it's just something to keep an eye on. It's kind of perceived that way, that like the SEC and the Big 10, the Big 12, their teams are better and it's tougher competition. So you might look at a team like Oklahoma, who is, let's see, they're 16. I think they're 16-10 right now. And you're like, wow, they have 10 losses. But then you look at a team maybe in the WCC who's only lost 4 games. And you're like, hey, they've lost less games. But the committee argues, hey, but they've played lesser teams. They may compare the 2 resumes and be like, wow, this guy, he's older and has more experience. And maybe that's what we're looking for. But then also over here, we have this younger guy. He might have better ideas, but he doesn't have quite the experience. Now, those are things that the committee has to hash out, but they do have to make a judgment call when it comes to competitiveness, comes to quality wins, and different things like that. So that is a little crash course about bracketology. Again, I don't expect you guys to know everything, but if you could go watch, if you could watch this video, if you're listening to this podcast or watching this video, and you're able to go tell your friend at least one thing about bracketology, about one thing that you learned today, then today is a success. But you guys can look this up on ESPN. Again, it changes because it is not quite set. They're currently going through the regular season, and then once the regular season ends, you'll play your group, your conference, in a little mini tournament to see who's the conference champion. If you're the conference champion, you automatically get in. If not, then you'll just have to rely on your resume, your interview skills, and your qualifications to get into the tournament. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for joining me on Fan Talk today. Again, 100th episode was last time, and I totally didn't realize it until after I published it. So just thank you guys for being along with this journey. It's been so fun. To another 100 episodes of Fan Talk. Oh, man, I am so excited. And for those of you who are still here 23 minutes and 34 seconds in to the episode, I might be dropping a special double episode, a special additional episode this weekend. I am going to Washington, D.C., so I might do a little live reporting out there. Stay tuned for that. You can follow me on social media on Instagram at Fan Talk Podcast for more updates there. I'll link all my socials down below. And guys, have a great Wednesday. I'll see you guys later for another edition of Fan Talk.